Contemporary visual art of Kazakhstan cited a big offender his creativity. The collapse of the Soviet Union culminated on the fall of communism and freedom from the control of Soviet political organizations over the content and the dissemination of information. This impacted the censorship policy of not only printed matter, radio and television broadcasters, but also cinematography, music, and especially visual art. The visual art of this period reflected the basic directions of the development of public consciousness in Kazakhstan, the search for new ideology and identity. On the one hand, the search for the new ideology was focused on the idea of returning to the lost roots. On the other hand, the new authorities were focused on economic stability issues, therefore the culture faded into the background. And the artists have become trendsetters with the opportunity to speak openly, free and without prejudice about burning social, cultural, political and spiritual issues through their work. The trend of free art and its popularization was demonstrated with exhibitions Perkreostok, Intersection and Alwan Different in the 1990s in Almaty, which has become platforms for the promotion of creative associations such as Green Triangle, Night Tram, Kızıl Tractor, and as well as informal groups of artists. The idea of nomadism as well as returning to lost roots to this day are relevant topics among artists. These topics still exist but were transformed and further developed, looking for new meanings and using alternative technologies. We can see that on the example of the trans-avant-garde art group Kızıl Tractor, that means Red Tractor. The Red Tractor art group, one of the first avant-garde art group in Kazakhstan, that was established in 1990s by artist Vitaly Simakov in Shymkent city, Kazakhstan. Creativity of Red Tractor can be called distinctive and nationally informed, and their shapes are close to shamanistic campaigns, music, Muslim archaic traditions, nomadism and modernity. The artists of Red Tractor work with the image of nomad as an embodiment of the steppe freedom of will and a purifying spirit of Tengrism. Artists use materials made of leather, felt, wood and other environmentally friendly materials. During the performances, the artists are primal to shamans and wandering Sufis, dancing to the sound of traditional instruments such as dombra, kobus, tambourine, and the drums. Tengrism is an ancient Central Asian Eurasian steppe sky god Tengri-centered religion. Tengri is one of the names of the primary chief deity used by the early Turkic and Mongolic peoples. Worship of Tengri is Tengrism. The core beings in Tengrism are the Heavenly Father and the Earth Mother. Over the years, the band has changed several names, but in 1995 the art group gets its current name, Red Tractor. This name was chosen for a reason. On the one hand, a memorial tractor is a monument of industrialization that was installed on a pedestal at the South Kazakhstan Regional Museum of History and Local Lore in Shymkent. On the other hand, Kızıl Tractor at that time was associated with avant-garde labor enthusiasm. In the 90s, the art group Kızıl Tractor demonstrated a performance mummification, symbolically plastering and bandaging this red tractor for centuries as a powerful and right model of engineering and the technical progress of the early 20th century. One of the latest exhibitions, Collection of Thoughts, Inventing Stories, was held in New York in 2018. Which was dedicated to the creativity of the art group Red Tractor. The large-scale exposition became a part of the special program of New York Week of Asian Contemporary Art and the project Focus Kazakhstan, arranged by the National Museum of Republic of Kazakhstan with the support of the Ministry of Culture and Sports of the Republic of Kazakhstan within the framework of the state program Ruhani Жаңғыру, that means spiritual revival. Before the exhibition was opened, the artists held a ceremony of artistic shamanic purification of the space, riding on a huge tambourine like a wheel throughout the center of Mana Contemporary. A 3-meter tambourine was made of wood and leather. Moreover, in order to give the object naturalness and even some primitiveness, the members of the group stretched the skin not smoothly and neatly, but with tears and rough edges. This was followed by the ritual part, which included fumigating the air with adraspan, running around and screaming. Then one of the members climbed onto the tambourine and left through the felt book, sprinkling it with water and shaking out the dust. All Kızıl Traktor performances contain aspects of shamanism manifested in the instruments that are used, the drum and the ritual ceremonial part, ritual with adraspan or sparkling with water, as well as trying on images of a shaman bahsa. Kızıl Traktor applies shamanistic practice in its work but with help of art objects and shamanistic actions with artistic means. In sacred performances of Kızıl Traktor, they establish a connection between the artist and the viewer. Members of the art group became meditators just like shamans bahsa. On the other example of the exposure and demonstrated performance in New York, we can imagine that art group members tried to provide and even materialize the concept of purification practiced by shamans by using the adraspan grass. The viewer was involved and complicity in action. Nevertheless, shamanism exists in the daily life of the Kazakhs, demonstrating itself in various forms. For example, modern Kazakhs to this day practice burning the adraspan grass. According to the tradition of the shamans bahsa, the smoke from adraspan can purify the aura of the area and move it over the person's head in order to hex removal. Kızıl Traktor, they reflect social, cultural, religious, economic, political changes, comparing them with nomadic traditions, shamanistic beliefs. They reflect traditional ethical values by means of non-trivial transfer of sensations from everyday scenes, rituals, and use of natural materials, shamanistic and religious objects, symbols, and motifs, but through the art prism. The Kızıl Traktor art group characterized as a collective of creative and bright personality artists. Each artist has its own unique and distinctive feature of the artistic style language, but as a group they all follow the same issues from alternate perspectives.
Said Tatabekov has been member of Red Traktor Group since its very formation. He was born 1965 in Besterik, Uzbekistan. Now he lives and works in Shymkent, Kazakhstan. Said Tatabekov graduated from Shymkent Art College in Kazakhstan in 1993 and is a key figure in Central Asia contemporary art scene. He began his artistic career as a founding member of Red Traktor, the first avant-garde art movement founded in independent Kazakhstan. His practice observes and reflects on the dramatic social and political change in the area, the transition from nomadic culture through communism and onto capitalism in less than a century. He captures the sense of insoluble conflict between mutually exclusive but simultaneously occurring events, skillfully identifying and animating the impact of different aspects of such changes. Reflecting on the search for identity and returning to the lost roots topics, Said Tatabekov in his projects use the image of a dervish who resembles more of a shaman, a lonely stranger. This character is one of the main figures and later repeatedly appeared in his works, among which is worth highlighting Chinggis Khan's Dream and the video project Neon Paradise. For the first time, a dervish figure was presented at the Vienna Festival in the 90s during his performance Chinggis Khan's Dream. During his performance, he knelt on a carpet made of stone and fell to the floor while the colleagues circled his figure with green paint. The performance focused on the idea that the ruler remains only a criminal silhouette on earth, more specifically to the Soviet ideology, communism, and the legacy that political leader as Stalin left behind. And the dervish in his projects is a personification of ancient Kazakhs who worshipped heaven and the spirits of their ancestors. Dervish is a person engaged in an unconscious search for new identity after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Against a background of Soviet socialist habits denial, people began turning to new religious movements, such as Buddhism, Hinduism, but the majority turned their sights to the Western culture, and more specifically, to Europe. Here must be mentioned that shamans back then played the role of intermediaries communicating between people, worlds, and spirits inhabiting the middle world. In addition to the role of mediator, shamans served as healers by providing practical support and helping to strengthen the spirits of the soldiers. So where does Chengiz Khan's idea come from in the projects of Said Tatabekov? Chengiz Khan is a historical person who established the Mongol Empire. The title of the work and Chengiz Khan figure itself refers us to the history of Kazakh Empire and the legacy that was left by the ancestors. In this case, we can draw parallels between Chengiz Khan and Stalin, between the dependence of the Kazakh Khanate on the Mongol Empire and political control over the socialist countries under the Soviet Union. At the same time, it refers to the idea of a cult and cult of the ancestors. Since ancient times, the idea of a cult was close to the culture of nomads. The world of nomads was filled with spirits, both good and evil. In high esteem were the good spirits of their ancestors, arwahtar. Particular relevance to the spirits of ancestors permits Kazakh customs and rituals from ancient times to the present day. And among the ancient Turks was popular the art of working with stone called balbatas. According to scientists, stone sculptures were erected as monuments to deceased people, most often on standing figures, as special structures cut down from stones. Historically, the Turkic people went a long and difficult way, from the cult of Tengri, Jersu, Umay, through the worship of shamans, magicians, and sources, then to worship of the Stepher tribe's god of Mitra to Zoroastrianism that was close to the pagan essence of the beliefs, consisting of polytheism, the saturation of the world spirits, magicians, and sources, and above all this were the cults of the sun and ancestors. With the project Chengiz Khan's Dream, Said Tatabekov tried to express his point of view that the former secretaries of the Communist Party, like any other state person, are not prophets or gods. And the figure of the dervish is most likely the personification of a post-Soviet person who was in search of identity in Kazakhstan, which was in search of economic stability between the renunciation of obsolete socialist habits and the adoption of new challenges of globalization. In the video work Neon Paradise, strong parallels with globalization are evident. In this video project, Said Tatabekov appears as a dervish sitting in front of the automatic doors that open every time he prays. The automatic doors open at every dervish's bow, and we can hear the chirping of paradise birds. And when the doors close, we hear the noise from the streets and cars. Automatic supermarket opening doors represent the gates of paradise. On the one hand, this work can be interpreted as a worship of Western culture, imitation, and desire to confirm the West. On the other hand, this suggests the idea that a person himself creates an idol for worship, as was mentioned before. In this project, a person worships not an individual person, but the world phenomenon like Western culture. And the dervish seems more like a savage to whom the wonders of civilization like the automatic doors are alien and something supernatural. And Said Tatabekov himself describes this work as humorous and ironic. According to the memories of Said Atabekov, when in the 90s construction of the shopping centers with installed automatic doors began, his son got scared when he went to the door and they opened. This was a great discovery for him and something comparable to a fairy tale magic in real life. Said Tatabekov himself experienced a similar shock back in Warsaw in 1988 when he first saw automatic doors in one of the Centrum shopping centers. Then, for Said Tatabekov, the Centrum seemed paradise. In 2016, during a personal exhibition at the Osman Gallery, Said Tatabekov presented works from the series Battle for the Square and Steppe Wolves. In one of the photos of Battle for the Square project, we see a dense mass of riders who have a black look in chaotic order. This is a black-white crowd, an endless protest of dividing the goat carcass like a piece of land. In this project, he reflects on the topic of ethnography and geopolitics. This project depicts the equestrian sports game cockpit, an ancient equestrian competition that was common among Asian people. On a more global scale, this project is about the market competition, the capture of air and water spaces, high prices per square meter of housing, and etc. Riders that stomp on the sportive fight for the carcass of a goat symbolize the modern Kazakh man who is eternally in search for his place in the sun. This work is also confessional to the artist himself and has a personal meaning. The fact is that during the creation of this project, the artist's family lived in a one-room apartment where each family member fought for his square meter. Here again, we can see the reference to the topic of the returning to the lost roots through the works of Said Atabekov. Since ancient times, the Turkish nomads deified the earth and water and the places of their sacralization, which is why both land and water were divided into their own and others, natives and hostile. The Turks were characterized by a clear view of their land and water, which made it possible to distinguish them from neighboring nations. This understanding led to the preservation of its specificity and identity. Ethnic isolation issue of the Turks historically arose from the division of land into one's own and another's own that later escalated in the specificity and identity of the Kazakh people issue. This isolation first arose in the bowels of Tengrism after passed on to shamanism and the cult of Mitra. Tengrism reflected the worldview and world outlook of nomads, the foundations of their mentality and the collective unconscious. Over history, a constantly nomadic person had adopted a sedentary lifestyle, changed years to Khrushchevka. Gradually, in the project Steppe Wolves, Said Tatabekov demonstrates individual futures, heroes, colors, paraphernalia. In one of the works, we see a rider sitting on a horse with a red star on the back of his jacket and a tank helmet. In other works from this project, he demonstrates the logos of famous brands with aurors such as Prada, Dolce Gabbana, Air Astana, and etc., or famous personal names. Steppenwolf's project is about an information society living in the period of consumerism. Writers sue logos for their identification of involvement in a certain social group. Following the globalization fashion, there is the idea of achieving social equality or even superiority through the demonstration of famous logos and their image. The Western culture manifests itself in a variety of forms, influence on people consciousness, the formation of new cultural vectors, as well as the worship of modern Kazakhs to famous world labels. On a more scaled level is manifested in branding, rebranding, and legalization of cultural and social complexes, street names, and cities. From the interview with Said Atabekov, he told when he arrived at the Kokpor, He saw a big red star on the back of one of the riders, as he told that it was clear that the rider saw this huge star on his jacket. It seemed to him that this horse rider flew into the steppe from some other distant planet. His project, dedicated to Kokpar, began with this horseman and this star. And as Said Atabekov told, this rider with a star on his back has become not only a steppe wolf but also a part of world contemporary art. Now he is a superstar. Since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Atabekov, amongst other intellectuals, reviewed the origin of nomadic culture and sees the light in Tengrism, the ancient belief practiced by Turkish tribes of Central Asia before the enforced indoctrination of Islam. Tengri identifies with the celestial sky, timeless and infinite, the main deity responsible for the creation of the universe. Atabekov believes that the original culture encoded in DNA is lost and remains only a fragment. The artist's work highlights the complex but common concerns such as importance of the reconfiguring of national identity in the mass context of the globalization, mass migration, environmental issues, inequality, and the challenges of a natural resources-driven economy. And while aware of the exoticism associated with the ingrown prejudices and stereotypes of Central Asia, Atabekov refers to the subject with a sense of irony.